Einstein's and Oppenheimer's secret paper on extraterrestrial aliens and UFOs. On September 24, 1947, an invisible organization takes its first steps that will in the coming years be the tool of a master government plan involving presidential and military involvement to approve all manipulations concerning the extraterrestrial presence on Earth and the concentration, elements, and technology. The action seems to include not only contact with extraterrestrial visitors and the management of conditions resulting from this, but also the control of information that is leaked intentionally or not, so both selective and filtered information and the disorientation of public opinion by channeling fake information are legitimate. The name of the organization, Majestic 12, scientists with global prestige and unique contribution to the evolutionary path of humanity, were invited to collaborate in this organization. Such were Bous van Aanar, Albert Einstein, Robert Oppenheimer, also senior officers such as Hoyt Vandenberg, Roscoe Hillenkotter, and George Marshall. To these was added a select body of other scientists and secret program workers. The aim of all this was to determine the presence of alien craft in the skies, determine their targets, and examine the possibilities of acquiring this technology. In June 1947, Einstein and Oppenheimer drafted a 6-page document at the request of Majestic 12. It was entitled Relations with the Inhabitants of Celestial Bodies. Relationship with the inhabitants of celestial bodies, where they gave their opinion on the relations between humans and extraterrestrials. The document also mentions the presence of unidentified spacecraft, which is accepted by the military. It also deals with issues that concern competent scientists to deal with, such as where do they come from, what should we do in case of colonization and or integration of peoples, and why are they here? Finally, the paper examines the presence of celestial starships in the atmosphere as a result of the actions of military experiments with fission, fusion, and devices of war. And it follows documents of the free translation published by website Metafiasco, Relations with Inhabitants of the Heavenly Bodies, draft June 1947, International Law and Earth Defense. The possible communication with people living outside the Earth is not a new problem, looking at the whole issue from the point of view of international law. But the possibility of communication with extraterrestrial intelligent beings who do not belong to the human race raises substantial problems, the solution of which is extremely difficult to find. In general, there will probably be no difficulty in understanding each other and establishing any kind of relationship with them, but in establishing the principles on which they will develop. First, it is necessary to base our communication on some language and dialect or something related. Then these extraterrestrial beings should have a similar psychology to that of humans in order to achieve mutual understanding. In any case, the current international legislation must give way to a new one structured on different bases, which could be renamed Law Between Planetary Creatures, quote unquote, and would follow the basic principles stated in the Pentateuch, Commentary C. Osterheim and Einstein. The Pentateuch are the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Of course, the evolution of the old legislation towards a new and revolutionary one capable of effectively handling new situations will push us to dramatically change the structure of the older one. Change is so important that the new structure that will emerge will be completely different. If these intelligent beings possess their own civilization and culture, but also better or worse political organizational structures, then they will have the absolute right to be recognized as independent and free beings. In this case, we will need to reach an agreement with them to establish the legal restrictions on which our future relations will develop. To make this possible, we will necessarily have to accept many of their own principles. Finally, if they refuse any kind of peaceful cooperation and become an imminent threat to Earth, then we will have every right to take all necessary measures and legitimize our defense, but we must maintain it only until said threat be eliminated. Differently involved Homo sapiens and colonies on the moon. Another possibility is that some kind of Homo sapiens has developed an independent nation on some other celestial body in our solar system and has evolved completely differently from us. Of course, this possibility depends on many parameters which cannot yet be predicted. However, we can study this possibility in general terms in light of the fact that something like this is already happening. Initially, the living conditions in these celestial bodies, for example, on the moon or on the planet Mars, they should be such as to allow the creation and maintenance to some extent of independent life. Much has been said about the possibility of life outside and beyond the Earth's atmosphere, always hypothetical, and there are those who advance and give even formulas and ways of creating an artificial atmosphere around the moon, several centimeters, which undoubtedly have a scientific basis and may one day become reality. For example, let's assume that there are magnesium salts on the moon and that they contain 13% water. Using energy and machinery that we can carry to our satellite, the moon, perhaps through a space station, we could process rocks, pulverize them, and then extract water from them. And then after the water is collected, it will be decomposed into hydrogen and oxygen using electricity or microwave solar radiation. Oxygen could be used for our respiratory needs, while hydrogen as fuel. In any case, if there is no possibility of creating and maintaining independent life on some other celestial body beyond the Earth, there is still the possibility of research missions to them for their natural wealth, with a constant rotation of people involved, without the ability to colonize them as independent beings and survive in an isolated life, then independence will never be achieved. Arrivals of extraterrestrial aliens on Earth and the role of the United Nations, analyzing above the possibility of the existence of life or not in another celestial body, we now come to the following question. How will we react in case human beings from another celestial body or extraterrestrial biological entities EBEs, want to settle in Earth? 1. Since they are politically organized and have a culture similar to ours, then they should be organized as an independent nation. They have to think and decide what level of development technology they need to have to be able to colonize the Earth. 2. Since they consider that our civilization is not distinguished by a political unity, then they will have the right to colonize the Earth, but the colony that will be created will not be able to be based on older classic patterns. A colony of superior structure must be devised, which will be a kind of trusteeship, possibly with the tacit consent of the United Nations. But does the United Nations have the legal right to allow such guardianship over people? I would say no. There can be no doubt that although the United Nations is an international organization, yet it has no right to allow such guardianship, since its authority does not extend beyond the relations between its members. On the other hand, it will acquire the right to intervene only if the relations of a member state with a celestial body affect another member state. Thus, if the above relation leads to a conflict between two member states, then the United Nations will have every right to intervene. B. If the United Nations were a supernatural organization, by the term supernatural is meant an organization that is above nations and decides for them, would have every right to intervene in any kind of problem related to extraterrestrial beings. Of course, since it is merely an international organization, it will acquire the above right only if its member states decide to recognize such a right. Economic and social issues regarding the exploitation of planet Earth. It's difficult to predict the behavior and effectiveness of international law in the event of an alien invasion of our Earth. All we can say for sure is that there will be racial changes in traditional concept, radical changes. We cannot rule out the possibility that a race of extraterrestrial beings, technologically and economically more advanced, will want to take the right to invade another celestial body. But how will this invasion be achieved? 1. The possibility of exploitation of a celestial body exclusively by a non-Earth race should be rejected, since it is clearly commercially preferable to grant the exploitation right to other races that have access to the respective body. In this case, the advantage of the original race is large and is maintained at the expense of the rest. 2. The division of a heavenly body into zones and their distribution to the other races, but this will create the problem of division. In addition, other heavenly clans will be deprived of the ability to own an area, or once they have acquired the above right for a certain area, they will now have to get involved into complex processes. The regime of undivided co-sovereignty will give each celestial race the right to use it as it wants and in its interest the territory that belongs to it, regardless of the use of the rest. But this will create a regime of anarchy, and in the end, the strongest will prevail at the expense of the weakest. Number 4, creating a moral entity. The most feasible solution seems to be to reach an agreement that will ensure the peaceful absorption of our celestial race in such a way that our civilization will remain intact while the necessary guarantees will be given on our part that their presence will not be revealed. In fact, we don't think we'll need to go that far. The best solution would be to create an international body or treaty among the heavenly citizens that would prevent the exploitation of all states belonging to the United Nations. Invading Earth? Why? Today, the regime of exploitation of the various regions of the Earth by the individual states, which is not subject to adequate international law, since there are no longer res nullius areas, has begun to regain all its lost importance in secular international law. The right to exploit an area by a single state is essentially usurping a res nullius area from it. Until the last century, the ownership of an area simply meant its conquest by a state. But when the first exploration missions were carried out that led to the discovery of new, until then unknown areas, either uninhabited or at lower levels of development, the above concept changed drastically. The imperialist expansionist policy of the respective states came to an end when there were no more areas to be conquered. Now, these areas have been transferred, quote-unquote, from Earth to space, where the rest of the celestial extraterrestrial states are creating new kinds of problems. Res nullius and res communis. The term res nullius is used for something that does not belong to anyone, such as the moon. In current international legislation, a celestial body cannot be property of any state. In short, it is considered res nullius. And that's assuming that there's no extraterrestrials up there that will stop us from taking it, conquering it. Now, if a celestial body of our solar system, such as, for example, the moon, colonized by inhabitants of another celestial body or conquered by some other extraterrestrial celestial race, then there will be no claim of res nullius by any Earth state if ever an Earth state decides to send an exploratory mission to the moon. But there will be a res communis claim, which means that all heavenly states should have equal rights over it. That's assuming that the extraterrestrials of the moon will allow that. Now, spaceships in the atmosphere, nuclear testing, and the imminent invasion. And now our final and most important question. Is the presence of alien spaceships in the Earth's atmosphere a direct result of our own nuclear testing, weapons testing? The presence of unknown spaceships in the Earth's atmosphere and possibly maintaining orbits around our planet is now considered a de facto fact by the country's military leadership. And any question about whether the U.S. will they continue testing with fission bombs and fusion devices, hydrogen bombs, or if they will reach an agreement on the general disarmament of all weapons of excessive destruction, with the exception of chemical wars, for which miraculously an agreement has already been reached. The laments of the philosophers The efforts of politicians and the conferences of diplomats have in the past led to successive failures without achieving anything at all. The use of atomic bombs in combination with space vehicles creates a particularly great threat to such an extent that it is deemed necessary to immediately reach an agreement in this field, or the appearance of unidentified space vehicles, what we call UFOs, opinions differ as to their origin, in the sky of Europe and the United States and elsewhere, almost every country, of course. An intense fear has been born, a security anxiety that pushes the great powers into a fierce effort to find a common solution to the threat in question. Military officials see the use of spaceships with nuclear warheads as the ultimate weapon of war. Even the creation of artificial satellites for intelligence information gathering and target selection as not far from its realization. The military importance of space vehicles, satellites, and rockets is indisputable. Attacks now come not from specific and exclusive directions, not even from any specific country, but from the sky, thus making it particularly impossible for the defender to immediately determine who is attacking him and how he should defend himself and how he will immediately react in retaliation. The above problems are further complicated by the process of recognition, hence how an orbiting satellite recognizes, or more specifically, it classifies its target. For now, we can breathe a little more safely knowing that slow-moving bombers are the way to deliver atomic bombs. Thus, they can be detected by long-range satellite and radar. But what do we do, let's say, in 10 years, when artificial intelligence satellites and missiles find their place in space? We must realize the potential threat that the aforementioned unknown space vehicles can become. One must consider the fact that a misidentification of said spacecraft for an ICBM could lead to a nuclear war with terrifying consequences. And finally, we must consider the possibility that our own tests in the atmosphere, which we have been conducting of late, are responsible for the revival of said celestial extraterrestrial fleet. Perhaps they acted out of curiosity, or even felt threatened by such an activity, which makes sense, since the Russians go out of their way to observe and record such tests. In conclusion, based on our own professional opinion, based on data provided, the present situation is extremely dangerous, and immediate action to remedy this very significant problem is deemed necessary. Sincerely. And this is signed by Dr. J. Robert Oppenheimer, Director of Advanced Studies, Princeton, New Jersey, and Professor Albert Einstein, Princeton, New Jersey. Isn't that very interesting? Now, they seem to be saying that they believe that extraterrestrials are out there, and they believe that extraterrestrials are watching us, and most probably these extraterrestrials are more advanced technologically than we are, so there's no way that we can ever keep them from invading us and conquering us using our resources. And obviously, they also believe that these extraterrestrials could be worried about the fact that our nuclear and atomic energy capabilities can not only destroy our planet and not only create an upheaval in our solar system, but also perhaps create an upheaval in our galaxy. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support, and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.